do give us a follow. And also, if there is any inappropriate behaviour or comments or any gate crashes that you see within the chat or comments being made, then please flag it up and we will certainly remove those people. But otherwise, please enjoy the event. Afia, you're muted.
I apologize. I cannot believe that. I apologize. I am now going to introduce the brilliant Dr. Michelle Asantewa, and I'm going to read Dr. Michelle's bio. Dr. Michelle Yah Asantewa is a writer, editor, and independent scholar, and facilitates a variety of workshops that are academic, creative, spiritual, and cultural. Her publications include Elijah, Something Buried in the Yard, The Awakening, collection of poems, a book on African-derived spiritual practice, Guyanese Comfort, The Ritual Art of Trance and Mamalou Tales, a folkloric biography of a Guyanese elder, and these were published by Way with Words Publishing, Editing and Tuition Services, which she founded in 2014. She is the co-course leader on the amazing James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, and Andrew Levy courses, and writes a regular blog at Way with Words Spiritual Creative, which combines spiritual, social, cultural, and artistic expression. Dr. Asantewa is the editor of In Search of Mamiwata, Narratives and Images of African Water Spirits, which was released in November 2020. Wow, that is incredibly impressive. Well, without further ado, please, can we all give a huge clap for Dr. Michelle Yah Asantewa?
Thank you so much, everyone. Good evening. Thank you, Afia, and the other members, Stacey, Isaac, and is it Ruth, I believe, who's not here, of the other team members of Caribbean Links, for inviting me to speak on African Caribbean spirituality. So I'm actually going to share my screen. So I don't know how long I have, but I'll try to get through some of these bits on the screen. How long do I have? Is it 10 minutes? Okay, fine, no problem. All right, so I am just going to share my screen. And I'm hoping that you guys can see that. And so, yeah, so I'm really going to talk about Guyanese Comfort, which is an African-derived spiritual practice. And in that, I'm also going to mention some of the other spiritual practices that are, from the Caribbean, that are African-derived. So the Comfort is one that is found in Guyana. It's spelt variously, so you might see it with a C. O-M-F-A, or you might see it with a C-U-M-F-O. But yeah, so it's African derived. I spell it with this K because I, in my research, managed to link it to this Akomfo or Akomfa, who are traditional priests and priestesses from Ghana, Akan in particular, who have this tradition still going. So the name itself comes from that. And so when you go into a state of trance in the practice, having heard, if you're hearing drums, as you can see in this picture there, they call it possession and they call it akom. So akom is when you catch the spirit, but in Guyanese, the Guyanese version of comfort, we'll say you catch comfort, which is another way of saying you catch spirit. Yeah, you've gone into a trance state, and the practice has historical ties with this group of, they're like spiritual Baptists. So they're linked to the Christian Euro-Judaic Christianity and those practices, but they're the Jordanites of Guyana, and they're known for wearing their long white flowing garments. So Comfort has links to this group initially. And part of it also is to do with a lot of water rituals, and it's linked to the water mama, or the mami water as it's known in the other areas of West Africa or Africa generally as well. And then obviously coming back into the diaspora. And so this is an example of a ritual that would be done, you know, at the seaside. And this is the book that I edited. It's an anthology, and this is from different parts of the world where people have contributed either their stories or their images on African water spirits. So this is only recently published last year, and we did the launch for it last month. This is just to show you that people who practice Kamfa or African spirituality in the Guyana context are also referred to as spiritualists or faitists, you know, in Guyana. So that's just something to be aware of as well. Comfort practitioner is sometimes also thought to be Obia man or an Obia woman, which is something we can take questions on really afterwards. But it's linked to it. And the practice of Obia is got varied rationale and various interpretations in the context of the Caribbean. But just to note that such practices were outlawed by European enslavers. So anything to do with the drum, anything to do where Africans gathered at night, you know, these were all kind of like seen as by the European enslavers as surreptitious, and so they outlawed it. And one such was this whole idea of Obia, which really translates to a power. It is, Africans believe that there was this power invested in all sorts of ways. You could manifest certain outcomes depending on your disposition, depending on your expectation. And you could use herbs or whatever the thing is that you needed to do to make that happen. And so one of the reasons why the Europeans outlawed it ultimately was, you know, to do with its efficacy. It means it was working, or there was enough belief in it, certainly, because the so-called Obia man or Obia woman or Obia practitioners used their art, if you like, to poison the enslavers, because of course they were at war and they used whatever was at their disposal to try to defeat the enemy, and reverting to their traditional practices, as it was the case in Haiti. The Europeans realized that they were using this in this way and then outlawed some of these systems. For which reason it was forced underground, especially during the 1950s, when by now Christianity, Euro-Christianity particularly, was now making its strong sway into the Caribbean, and obviously in Guyana, because at this point we're pushing for independence, but we are also trying to seem as though we're civilized, and there's certain things that we have left behind. So it's forced underground, these practices in favor of Christianity. These images are of myself and my mother, who are active spiritual practitioners, even though my mum is also very much a Christian. And this is just me saying here, this is what happens. So Christianity is now more openly practiced compared to...
Yep, which American inventor established a research laboratory in...
Okay, so this is just showing that so because it was outlawed, because it was forced underground, I'm actually part of a group called CADIS, which is a group that the Council of African Diasporic and Indigenous Spiritual Systems, and we've set up this petition. So if any of you are listening and would like to support our petition to get the UK government to legalize our practice, because, for example, whilst others can revert to their systems, like, you know, if you're Hindu or if you're a Muslim, there's certain things you can do without question. But as a practitioner of our Indigenous African Caribbean spiritual practice, and obviously, there are issues around that. So we've set up this petition to try and lobby Parliament to get that changed. And this is just to show you some of the practice, some of the rituals. And this is here in Suriname. So yeah, so this is the Suriname version of our Guyanese comfort, and that is called like Winti. Yeah, this is in Suriname, and then I'm just going to whiz through some of the other ones. This is in Cuba, and their version is called Santeria. So it's similar. So with the Santeria version now, which is in Cuba, still African derived, they have what we call a mixture of saints, so the Christian saints, with the Yoruba, the Ifa tradition, Yoruba deities. So it's a mixture, which they call syncretic. And you can look that up and find out what that is. So, for example, this image here is one you're seeing of the deity Ocean, and that is the river goddess Ocean. And she would be likened to the Virgin de Caridad. I can never say it. So they mix the saints, the Catholic saints, with the Yoruba deity. Then the others are. And then this one is showing Trinidad. So in Trinidad, they also have, Shango, or they have spiritual Baptists, and they also honor Orisha as well in Trinidad. Orisha are the versions in Yoruba. So they're all different deities representing different things. And in Brazil, their version is called Candomblé, which again is still linked to, it's still African derived, and it's still linked to the Yoruba dominant Yoruba Ifa tradition, Yoruba being from Nigeria. And then let's get to this other one. And then this is another version, which is Big Drum in Karakou. They're all linked, they all have drums. And just to show you that some are represented in literature, and these are two literature that speak to these traditions. That is Erna Brodber's book, which is on Mayolism, which is a practice in Jamaica. And then this one is Kamina, which is also practice in Jamaica, which is the subject of these books. Still all African derived, still all to do with ancestors and to do with deities and to do with African gods. This is them here, yeah. And of course, this is just showing you the trance that takes place, is a prevalent part of these traditions. This here is Haiti, the Haiti Voodoo tradition. Voodoo means spirit, yeah. But obviously we know that the Hollywood have co-opted voodoo and turned it into something that's very negative, and they put a very negative spin on the whole Haitian experience, especially when it comes down to its spirituality. This is just to show that this was the first full-length book on Comfort, or rather it had elements of comfort in it, but it was also to do with Caribbean language by this Dr. Keen Gibson, who is also Guyanese. And I would take that as my inspiration to also do my research, my PhD research, which is on Guyanese comfort, the ritual art of trance. I published this myself, and I do because I'm modeling what Mayo and Kamina and Louisiana do by Erna Brodber. I thought there needed to be a Guyanese version. And which is something buried in the yard. These were part of my PhD. So this book, which is something buried in the yard, is inserted in this book here, but you just get the story, the fiction, and this gives you the theory and the fiction. I'm wrapping up. And yeah, ancestral veneration is a very big part of African spirituality, and also this is called like a ganda. So this is like a ceremonial sacred space where it would be like a focus point for the particular thing that you're doing. In this case, this is in Guyana, in Buxton, and this day they were honoring the spirit of fire, which is another story we can talk about. This is just to show you another example in Guyana as well. So it's just overladen with lots of fruits, lots of alcohol, perfume, different food, different items that we can talk about. And just to show you that I didn't want this to just seem like this is statically in the Caribbean, but this is a moment where we bring that Caribbean spirituality into the UK, which is what this is. This is one I held here. And of course, just to say that drums and drumming plays a big part. And yeah, this is the fire one that I was telling you about. So this would be, they're all dancing and they're going around this fire, and somewhere along the line, someone or many of them will go into trance state. This is just to show you the family, this induction. So there is a spiritualist church that's called St. Matthias, which is headed by this reverend sister here. So this one is now a mixture of, so Comfort will actually have a mixture of some of the Christian elements with some of the African traditional elements. And there she is, Mother Leader Desiree. And yeah, just to say that the trance, which is what's happening here, very, very protective. This is a family and also other members of this very strong knit community. And these two sisters go into trance states, and of course they support each other. And just to show you, there's a lot of young people here who go into trance states in this community. And again, this is a family of them that do that and celebrate this tradition. Thank you very much for listening.
Wow, that was incredible. Thank you so much, Dr. Michelle, for that. That was truly amazing. Can we please give Dr. Michelle a huge clap for that? Thank you so much. That was brilliant. I'm now going to pass on to the brilliant Stacey.
Thank you, Afia, and thank you, Dr. Michelle, for your talk. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is Reverend Canon Garth Minnett. So Reverend Canon Garth Minnett is a lecturer at the United Theological College of the West Indies, Mona, St. Andrew, Jamaica, a role he has held since July the 1st, 2003. In this role, he lectures in practical theology, especially in Introduction to Ministry, Christian Ethics, and Christian Worship. Prior to his current position, Canon Minnett was rector of the Brownstown Cure, having been ordained a deacon in 92 and a priest in 93. He's a recent graduate of the University of the West Indies with an MPhil degree focusing on the church, social justice, and HIV and AIDS. He's also a graduate of McGill University with an MA in theology. He's married to Denise and they have 2 children. Reverend Minnett is Deputy President of the College and Coordinator of the Doctor of Ministry program offered by Columbia Theological Seminary Decatur in Georgia, USA. He pursued professional development training in areas such as instructional design, basic research skills, and clinical supervision. Other areas of professional involvement include consultant on mainstream and HIV and AIDS in the curriculum, voluntary counselling and testing for HIV master trainer, former member ethics committee of the University of West Indies medical faculty and national bioethics committee, and member of the ethics committee of the Faculty of Humanities and Education in the University of West Indies. He has published articles in the Journal of Caribbean History, Groundings, and the Journal for the Network of African Theological Institutions. He received the CIBC RBC Bank Unsung Hero Award for work in the area of HIV and AIDS. Presently, he's a member of the International Anglican Roman Catholic Dialogue and chair of the board of the Jamaica AIDS Support for Life, a non-profit organisation serving the needs of people living with HIV, as well as trans persons and other vulnerable groups. He's also vice president of the Jamaica Council of Churches. Just wow. Thank you so much for coming. Reverend, please, we'd love to hear what you have to say.
Thank you so much. Yes, I had to breathe myself. Yes, I'm going to talk briefly about Pentecostals in Jamaica, and I'm subtitling it Versions of Power Play in and Outside the Church. Now, since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, there have been at least 3 news reports of leaders of the Pentecostal type churches that have been arrested in Jamaica. The first was a pastor in Gregory Park, St. Catherine, who was arrested for allegedly leading a gathering inside a house, contrary to the Disaster Preparedness Act, which governs societal operations during the COVID-19 pandemic. 2 other incidents took place this year, 2021, and both are in the parish of St. Anne. The first, a female pastor was arrested, along with members of her congregation, for numerous breaches of the act. In the other instance, a pastor was arrested as he was identified on social media, uttering obscenities at the Prime Minister and using language which suggests a death threat to both the Prime Minister and his family. This brief presentation is the fruit of my reflection on the possible causes for the allegations against these Pentecostal preachers and what their actions and or that of their congregants suggest about the practices of that religious tradition in Jamaica. Pentecostalism came to the Caribbean, and Jamaica in particular, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries as part of a wider accompaniment of the rise of the United States as a superpower in succession to that of Great Britain. According to social anthropologist Diane J. Austin Bruce, writing in 1997, the hegemonic expansion of the United States into the Caribbean, consequent on the decline of the economic power of Great Britain, provided the fillip for the travel and communication from North to South America. The Pentecostal movement, which traces its influence back to the first Pentecost in Jerusalem in AD 33, locates its identity and beginnings in the revival of Christianity in the United States, especially in the 1930s. In one sense, then, Pentecostalism is a body or agent for the movement of US hegemony as it carries the ideology of domination using the Bible as a tool for its messages. In another sense, the movement mirrors the quest for Caribbean peoples to self-identity and the exercise of power in the context of much emasculation, especially among men. Pentecostals believe in God, who is manifested in spirit form with the freedom to be present or embodied in its adherents. As Dennis J. Bennett writes, belief in the Holy Spirit suggests God lives in the believer and provides gifts such as speaking in tongues and prophecy. These gifts allow individual adherents to live in his or her present reality, but with the power to transcend it. Transcendence facilitates a view of the cosmos, which embraces influences from the outside, such as resources from the United States, which allow local Pentecostals to rubbish local systems of control, including law. In this sense, the rebellion against the Local Disaster Preparedness Act should come as no surprise. Such embrace of American hegemony and the implicit rejection of British imperialism allow Pentecostals to focus on the practice of healing designed to facilitate the construction of an alternate reality, which allows for meaningful living in the present without being constrained by law, systems, and processes. Practices of healing are essential to Pentecostalism. Mirroring the earlier practices of Bedwardism, whose founder, Alexander Bedward of Augustown, St. Andrew, carried out ritual practices of resistance against British rule. Pentecostalism, on the other hand, focuses on healing as a means of survival for their adherents. Caught in the vortex of tensions between race, class, culture, and gender in the Jamaican religious space, the politics, economics, and social practices find expressions in healing designed to bring happiness and joy to adherents. So, like Marx's opiate, healing in Pentecostal practice is a means of helping the faithful traverse the torrid zones of racial and class struggles while remaining focused on the importance of negotiating corridors of power. Without advocacy for any radical change to current culture and gender norms, healing is designed to keep some things in place while transforming others for the sake of the moral order. Undue stress caused by internal and external processes of church and society are condoned where they are no threat to the survival of the movement. In this sense, Pentecostals are similar to earlier Protestant traditions such as Anglicans, Baptists, Methodists, etc. There is a focus on sanitizing or supporting the status quo, while at the same time navigating spaces which allow rites and ceremonies to prop up rather than challenge the system of domination. Yet, Pentecostals are different from these Protestant traditions, not just by its American roots, but also by the focus on rules of purity. In this sense, hats and dresses worn by women are seen as scriptural and are signs that the community is washed in the blood of the Lamb, that is the blood of Jesus, and thereby enshrines female subordination to men. At the same time, this practice of healing enjoins men to take care of women and ensure they are protected at all costs. It is to this end that in one of the cases I mentioned earlier in St. Anne, males were overheard on one video saying those who remained after the arrest of the female pastor are to do what she says. This reaction to the injunction of the pastor suggests in my mind four things about Pentecostalism in Jamaica. First, as Austin Bruce notes, Pentecostals cooperate in teams at work, at church, at home, and elsewhere, and they do this in almost a clique fashion. Each one looks out for the other, as together they create another world, heaven, while still living in this world. Alternate or transcendent reality is one way to resist the systems of this world without confronting them, as we see, for example, with the Rastafarians in referring to oppressive systems as Babylon. A second view of the Pentecostals is the need to secure jobs for members of the team. Pentecostals look out for each other, and if one member secures a job, she or he will ensure vacancies are filled by fellow Pentecostals. This networking mimics established approaches to class and cultural relations, but is confined to members of the sect. Even families that are not members of the church may be ignored for the benefit of fellow pilgrims. Public witness is a third view on the practice of Pentecostalism. Prayer and fasting services are often held in workplaces and are either clandestine or open, depending on how the environment is assessed and experienced. An assessment is done by adherents to determine if the level of openness at the workplace, for example, will allow for the practices of the church, such as long devotions at the beginning of the day. This too is often the case in school devotions and other institutions. Once freedom to practice the tradition is determined, public witness becomes the norm. Finally, tithing sustains the financial viability of the church. A financial commitment to maintain the institution through sacrificial giving or the tithe is a commitment by adherents of Pentecostalism to be in the world but not of the world. The point noted in number 2 above about work is not accidental, as once a job is secured, a member is expected to tithe in order to express gratitude to God. This is one way to maintain the church and to maintain the pastor, and hence the vociferous ways all three pastors in the stories mentioned earlier are highlighted. Pentecostal pastors have something to defend in this world and in the next. As in the examples given earlier, Pentecostal leaders will contend with any power, political or otherwise, in and outside the church, to protect their integrity at all costs, even if it means defying laws. So, this brief presentation on Pentecostals in Jamaica, versions of power play in and outside the church, is the fruit of my reflection on possible causes of allegations against Pentecostal preachers. The actions of the leaders and their congregants suggest religious traditions like Pentecostalism must be taken seriously in Caribbean development and in the Jamaican landscape in particular. Thank you very much.
Sorry, thank you very much, Reverend. Thank you for your talk. I'm sure it will generate a lot of discussion. Can we all just show Reverend a round of applause, please? Thank you. On that note, we are going to have all of our panelists give their talk and then afterwards have a question and answer discussion. However, if there are any questions that come up during the talks, please feel free to put in the chat box and then we'll go through them at the end. But yes, thank you very much, Reverend. So now I'd like to hand over to Isaac.
Hello. So it is a wonderful pleasure of mine to introduce Pandit Bish. So Pandit Bish is a Hindu priest with the honorific title of Pandit. Pandit Bish was born in Guyana and he is currently resident in the United Kingdom. Pandit Bish serves the community. Pandit Bish, please do take it away.
Thank you very much, Isaac. You see, I didn't want you to work too hard. I didn't give you too much information. Sorry, right. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you. You have to forgive me if I am not too professional in this presentation because I wasn't too sure about exactly where to pitch whatever I will have to say. And so I'll try and make it up as I go along. But hopefully, if you have any questions, I'll be really, really happy to answer them. As Isaac have said, I'm a Hindu priest. I would like to begin with, to tell you a little bit about Hinduism. Hinduism is a title given to the followers of Sanatan Dharma. And it is very, very important that anyone who wants to understand anything about this practice, it is currently called Hinduism, needs to know the root, where it comes from. Sanatan means eternal, that which began at the beginning of time. Dharma, there is no proper single English explanation in any dictionary to tell you what is Dharma. And even among Hindus, we find it very difficult to define in a simple set of words. Why? Because it refers to a set of rules or guidelines or conditions that every human being is expected to follow. And that is to respect all of God's creation and to conduct yourself in such a way as not to cause any hurt, pain, suffering to anyone. And here, anyone does not refer only to human beings. It refers to all of God's creation. In Sanatan Dharma, it is written in the scriptures that when God created, he created 8,400,000 forms of life. And into each one of these forms of life, the spirit or the soul, we call it the Atma, is embedded into each one. And this Atma lives forever and ever and ever. It never dies. Even when the body dies, the Atma continues. So, as you see, it is very difficult to explain it in just a few words. What is Dharma? The word Hindu is attributed to the followers of this Sanatana Dharma some 700 to 800 years ago, when a group of Persians are said to have entered into the northern part of India, where they found the people who were living there practicing this Dharma. There is a river that's known as the Sindhu, the river Sindhu, and they were living on the banks of this river. And so the history says that the Persians, they started calling them Hindus because they were living on the bank of Sindhu. And we don't know for sure, but it is said that they could not pronounce Sindhu, so they misinterpreted or mispronounced it to Hindu. And so over the passage of time, the people of India became known as Hindus, because following from the Persians, the British went, and during British rule, they enforced it. And so today, most of us, followers of Sanatana Dharma, accept this title of being Hindus. So I just wanted to explain that bit for you. And so, and to tell you something about this Dharma. I don't know if I'm giving you too much information or information that you've come across. Maybe some of you know all of this already. But in our Sanatana Dharma, these a few things that are very, very important that everyone should know is that there are 4 ages: Satyug, Treta, Dwapar, and Kalyug. These are ages or cycles during that mankind goes through in every, we call it Yuga. And so Satyug lasts for 3.2 million years. Treta Yuga, 1.7 million years. Dwapar Yuga, nearly 800,000 years. And Kali Yuga, the age that we are presently living in, will last for 435,000 years. And we are only into the first 5,000 years of this Kali Yuga. So in the vast expanse of time, yes, if you can try and understand this, figure this out where we are. Okay, I was asked a question about Hinduism and the Caribbean. Hinduism came to the Caribbean when we all know the history, you know, that the British, they had taken the slaves from Africa and had them working on the plantations. But then when slavery was abolished, the British, they did not have a source of free, cheap labor, and they were the rulers in India at that time. So they went over there and they brought the people from there, and they said, "We're not taking you as slaves, we're taking you as indentured laborers." And for that, they were supposed to give them a contract for 5 years to work on the plantations and to pay them, to provide accommodation, to provide all health care, health treatment, schooling, everything was supposed to be provided for them. But I don't want to go too much into that side of the history, but it was these people who were taken from India that brought Hinduism to Guyana, to Trinidad, to Jamaica, Belize, St. Vincent, all the small islands. Their presence where Indians from India came. And when they came, they brought their religion with them. And I must say, you know, when I was listening to, is it Asantia, who made that beautiful presentation about the spirituality of Africa, all of that was lost. But fortunately, I should say, I wanted to say for us, for the followers of Sanatana Dharma, they were not able to destroy. They tried their best to convert all of us to Christianity, but they were not able to convert, not even in India. Hinduism survived the British and the Persians, and it's still a very, very strong and major, if you like, religion. We don't call it a religion, it's a way of life. And so in Guyana, our ancestors who came, they've set up the temples and they've established this Hindu Dharma. And today it is very, 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 very positive. And in fact, Guyanese who are on this program will know that you have this the Mahasabha, and you have this, I think the Hindu Dharmic Sabha, who are well organized throughout the country. And so this religious following is very, very well established in Guyana. I want to tell you a little bit about the scriptures of Hindu or Sanatana Dharma. There are 4 Vedas. And today, in Oxford and Cambridge and all the educational establishment, they have now come to accept that these scriptures written in Sanskrit, the language of Sanskrit, is the most ancient language. And the knowledge in the Vedas are the most ancient knowledge. One of our great missionaries, he said of the Vedas that there is not a question that any human being can have that is not already answered in one of these Vedas. So whatever questions we have, somewhere in these Vedas, the answers will be found. So I told you there are 4 Vedas: the Rig Veda, the Sam Veda, the Atharva Veda, and the Yajur Veda. And in all these millenniums of years that have gone by, a few other, we call itihasas, or histories, have been written. One is called the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata has been produced in London here. The BBC has shown this a few years back, the entire Mahabharata. Within this Mahabharata is the Bhagavad-Gita. I'm sure many of you would have heard of the Bhagavad-Gita. Today, if you have a smartphone, you have a Gita. All you have to do, type Bhagavad-Gita, and you will have a copy of it in any language that you speak. So I will urge you to have a look at it. It is not a book of religion. Please forgive me for saying this, because Sanatana Dharma, as I said, is not a religion, it's a way of life. And all the teachings and all the instructions that have been given is to enable human beings to live a full and perfect life. In addition to the Bhagavad Gita, there is the Ramayana. This Ramayana has played a very, very major role or major part in maintaining the Hindu religion or the Sanatana Dharma in the West Indies, in the Caribbean. Because even today, there is no temple, there is no home. When somebody dies in Guyana, I know that for sure in Trinidad, wherever Hindus are, the Ramayana is being read. And it brings comfort to people. And so I don't want to use a comparison, make a comparison, because it will be misinterpreted with the Bible. But as much as the Bible is a source of strength to those followers, so are these scriptures to the followers of Sanatana Dharma. And so these are the major works of literature or culture, or I don't want to call scripture because some people don't want to accept their scriptures, but that's what they are. The instructions are all enshrined there, for everyone to follow. Something that is very important also for everyone to know, and that is every human life, according to the Vedas, are divided into 4 stages. The first stage is known as brahmachari. In brahmachari, the child grows up and the child is initiated, just like a baptism, and the child is then sent to school to learn about his dharma. And he or she is prepared for the next stage in the life, which is known as grihastas. Grihastas are householders, families. When you get married and you start your family, that is the second stage in the human life. The third stage is known as Vanaprasth. Vanaprasth is when you retire from your normal work. And during this time, one is expected to not only help out in the family home, but also to enjoy their retirement. I say help out in the family home because today, most of the Vanaprasthas or the retired people, they have become babysitters. Yes, to help the family to take care of the grandchildren. And the final stage in our life, a human life, is known as a sannyas. A sannyasi is one who does not hanker after personal gain and personal possessions, but they spend the last years of their life in doing what we call social work or helping out in the community, and without gain, without the desire to be paid. They don't expect anything, but they just prepare themselves for the time when they will have to return to the Lord, because each and every one of us will have to return to the Lord. Yes. You know, when we, according to our teachings and our scriptures, it says that before we are born, the soul, our parents, they made a pact between themselves that they will start a family. When they made this decision and this pact, then in the heavens, the Lord decided which soul will be reborn to that couple or to that family. And therefore, that the Atma or the spirit is placed in the womb of that embryo and then will come out into the world and start his life. So, you know, Hinduism is very spiritual. There is not an aspect of our life that is not covered by some teachings that are written in these various books of ours. I think you wanted me to say a few words about in the Caribbean, how it affects people in the Caribbean. Well, today we all know throughout the Caribbean, everyone, I think Isaac mentioned about 4 major religions in the Caribbean. Yes, and as far as I know, and as far as I'm experiencing, they all work harmoniously with each other. And right now, since independence in the Caribbean, there are many national holidays that are awarded to people, followers of the various religions. And Hinduism is no different. You mentioned about Phagwa or Holi. This is one of the festivals where everyone joins in. I'm told in Guyana, you have the parades that go up and down the coast, where everyone is singing and dancing and rejoicing and playing with the various colors. So, you know, even though on the spiritual side, everyone doesn't observe all the spiritual aspects or the ritualistic aspect of it, but the social and the cultural aspect of it, everyone shares. And it's a wonderful thing that, you know, the Caribbean can teach the rest of the world, you know, unity in diversity, how we can be different, but still we can be unified, and we can teach the entire world. This is something that the people from different parts of the world should come and look at the Caribbean and learn, and maybe make the world a most peaceful world and harmonious world. You asked me about a favorite memory. Now in Guyana, when I was there and growing up, Hagwa or Holi was celebrated in the morning with everyone running around with buckets of water, throwing it on everyone and anyone, whether you're a follower or not. And, you know, we had great fun by, you know, just buckets of water, people passing on the road, and you just chuck a bucket of water on them. And instead of getting mad, you know, people realized what it was and they were enjoying themselves. And so, you know, it's one of my ideas in the evening. I must say at 12 o'clock, all the water business stops. And then everyone changes into their nice white clothes. And again, in that presentation that you showed, I noticed that in Buxton there was a festival where you put the banana leaves on the ground and there was like a plant in the middle. And I noticed that you have a diya. Diya means the earthen light that was lit there. You know, for Pagwa, before we start the playing, yes, a month before, 40 days before, we plant the holika in the ground. And if you were to go and I don't have a photograph of it, but if you were to check, you will see it will be very, very similar to this. So when I saw that, I thought, you know, we might think that we're different, but really we have so much more in common than that which we think separates us. And so you know, I must commend you for organizing this program. And I hope in the future we can share more, and maybe I'll be better prepared with some photographs, yes, to help to show you how common so many things are common. Because, you know, at the end of the day, I just want to end here with my saying that once I asked for one of the Methodist hall next to my home, yes, for a family who had just cremated. They were going to cremate their father, and they wanted a place to bring back all their friends and serve some refreshment. I know the Methodist hall normally rents rooms, and I went to inquire about it. And the secretary who was there, she said to me that, who are these people? So I said, I told her the name, and then she said, are they Hindus? I said, yes. She said, oh, no, we don't want them here. So I said, why you don't want them here? She said to me, we left it to somebody, some Hindus, and they brought all their gods. This is a great, great misunderstanding. They brought all their gods in here, and the Reverend was not very happy. So I said to her, can I speak to the Reverend? She said, well, he's not here. But to end very quickly, the phone rang at the same time, and who was on the other end of the line? It was the Reverend. So I asked her, please ask him if I can speak to him, you know, because it was urgent. So he agreed, he took the phone. So he said to me, he started apologizing, you know, I'm very, very sorry, but this is what happened and all that. So I said, Reverend, can you please tell me, answer me my question. I said, what's your question? He said, how many gods are there? He said, as far as I'm concerned, there's one God. So I said, so why did you say that the Hindus brought all their gods here? How many gods did they bring? Oh, he said, lots and lots and lots. So I said, but you just told me there's only one God. He said, don't play games with me. So I said to him, I'm not playing any game with you, right? I just want you to think about what you're saying. Because if we have a Christian God, we have a Muslim God, we have a Jewish God, we have a Hindu God, by my reckoning, that's 4 gods. And you just told me there's only one God, and I believe you. There is only one God. He said to me, oh, I see where you're coming from. So I said, Reverend, I just want to tell you, and this is a message that we should be giving to all our people. Yes? To a Christian, God is a Christian. To a Muslim, God is a Muslim. To a Hindu, God is a Hindu. So a Jewish person, God is a Jew. But it is the same one God. And let us try to understand only that. And we are able to understand, yes, that the Lord speaks all languages. He listens to everyone. He never differentiates between any. And therefore, that is the message that we should give. And this is the message of, I want to end here now, that Hinduism is a monotheistic religion. We know there is only one God. What you see in the temples, if you go, are images of manifestations of this Lord. Over these millions of years, the Lord has manifested himself on many, multiple occasions. And whenever this happened, the people, the followers at that time, they make an image of this Lord, which we call a murti. And that remains, because from the beginning of time, he was there for us. And as time goes on, he will manifest again. So there'll be more images of this Lord created. But we know there is only one God. Men call him by different names. And so this is what the Sanatan Dharma is about and Hinduism is about. That God created all of us. As I said to you, 8,400,000 forms of life was created. This is why we respect every form of life. And in that Bhagavad-Gita, the Lord says, you must also respect the inanimate creation of mine. Today, we are slowly realizing that all the trees and the rivers and everything that we are destroying, right, is part of God's creation. And we destroy it at our peril. We are the ones who are going to suffer. We are suffering, and the suffering will go on more if we don't stop it. So I'd like to say thank you for listening. I do hope I didn't go on too long, but thank you.
Thank you so much, Pandit Bish. That was incredible. Can everyone give him a very big applause? It's a really, really insightful discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'd now like to pass on to my team member, Stacey.
Thank you, Isaac. So last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Dr. George Mulrain. So Dr. Mulrain is a true Caribbean citizen. He was born in Trinidad and Tobago, received his theological education and ministerial formation in Jamaica at the United Theological College of the West Indies. He's married to a Jamaican. His first appointment as a Methodist minister was in the French and Creole-speaking Republic of Haiti. For several years, he served as one of the Caribbean representatives on teaching staff in a British Church's training in mission program at the Shelley Oaks Colleges, Birmingham. He spent 9 years in Antigua and Barbuda as the connexional president or bishop of the Methodist Church in the Caribbean and America, which entailed administrative duties in 8 geographical districts across the region. As an academic, he holds the BA degree of the University of the West Indies, the postgraduate diploma in pastoral studies, the MPhil in education, and the PhD in theology, all from the University of Birmingham in the UK. He is a musical composer, particularly of hymns with a calypso rhythm. He currently serves as the circuit superintendent of 5 churches in the Kingston and St. Andrew area in Jamaica. He and his wife, Mrs. Zada Mulrain, are parents of 2 daughters and grandparents of 2. Wow, amazing. Thank you. Reverend, please.
Thank you very much. It's good to be here and involved in this important seminar, conference, whatever you want to call it, but the focus is on religion. And we had a very meaningful presentation from Dr. Michelle, and she focused on Caribbean religion, an African religion expressed in Guyana. And I want to continue in that strain by focusing on Vodou in Haiti. Now, I think it is important to say at the very beginning that when people hear the name Vodou or the term Vodou, they think immediately of something that causes one to be, causes shivers to be sent up one's spine. And one thinks of the Hollywood movies in which you have the voodoo priests sticking pins into dolls and that sort of thing. But one of the things I want to emphasize is that voodoo is not something that ought to instill fear in us, because voodoo is a religion and it is an attempt to link to the Supreme Being. As Dr. Michelle had emphasized earlier on, the word Vodou means spirit. It comes from the Dahomean term, or Dahomey is what we refer to present day as Benin, a term meaning spirit. And so Vodou is an attempt to worship God through the spirits. I suppose similar to what Pandit Bish was saying a while ago, there is often a misunderstanding that persons think that voodoo worshippers are worshiping several spirits. And as we are trying to understand a little more, there is one God. And in Vodou, the effort is made to approach God through the spirits. So what you have is not several gods being worshipped, but the one God being worshipped, the one supreme spiritual being worshipped, but through the various spirits. Now, it is important for us to understand the African context out of which voodoo developed, because in the African understanding of truth, truth is not only physical, it is not only material, it is spiritual. In other words, truth is not only that which can be seen, which can be verified empirically. You see it, you touch it, you taste it, you smell it, you hear it. But truth is that which is spiritual, that which is not seen. It cannot be seen, but it is real. And so what we find in the African understanding of the universe or of the cosmos is that there is God, the supreme spiritual being, that one spiritual being. But in addition to that one spiritual being, there are a number of lesser spiritual beings, lesser spirits. And in the African understanding, individuals, when they leave this physical world, when they die, they move to the spiritual abode. They refer to it as the abode of the ancestors. And so the ancestors become spiritual beings. Now, in Vodou, the worship of God through the spirits is an indication that a number of ancestral spirits are closer to God. They are close to God, and therefore, for an individual to link with the one supreme spiritual being, the one God, it is better for you to do it through one of the ancestral spirits. Let's put it this way. In the normal situation in Africa, a chief, a man of influence, tremendous influence within any community, is not approached directly. I, as a normal human being, cannot just go to the chief. If I want to have audience with the chief, if I want to communicate with the chief, I do it through an intermediary. And so the understanding as far as religion is concerned is equally the case where in Vodou, you go to God through the spirits. You go to God through what in Vodou is referred to as the Loa. The Loas, or the spirits, are the ones which enable you to link with the Supreme Being. And so therefore, what I am saying is that within Vodou, Voodoo is a religion. It is not black magic as people often tend to refer to it. It is a genuine and authentic religion in which people try to make contact with the one Supreme Being. I mentioned these African ancestral spirits. In Vodou, you have, for example, one known as Dambala. That's the great, powerful spirit, Dambala. There is also Legba, and there is also Erzuli. These are African names. But what has happened in the understanding of Haiti, where Voodoo is the religion, is one of the religions, in the understanding of Haiti, these African spirits are not the only members of that pantheon, that Voodoo pantheon, but there are some spirits which were born because of the resistance between the Africans who were brought as slaves into Haiti during the 15th century. The links, the struggle between the Africans who were brought as slaves into Haiti and their European lords, the European overlords. And there was in the history of Haiti that struggle, that fight, that battle between the Haitians and the forces of Napoleon Bonaparte, which resulted in the victory for Haiti, for Haitians. And you will know, for example, that towards the end of the 18th century, 1791, for example, there was a particular ceremony in which the African slaves in Haiti, they prayed to God through their spirits. They called upon their spirits to ask for their assistance in the battle against the French. And it is believed that because of the victory that these African ancestral spirits were able to engineer, using, of course, the slaves, we can talk about Haitian independence. Haiti became independent in 1804, the first Black republic in the New World. And it is understood that the religion, Vodou, played a significant part in that event. Now, one of the things we have to understand about Vodou is that it is a religion, yes, but the other thing that we need to know is that it may be regarded as a syncretistic religion, syncretism, in which there are elements of other religious systems that have combined to bring about this one religious expression of Vodou. In the year 1685, there was what came out in France as the Code Noir. This Code Noir was the directive as to how slaves who had come into Haiti or into any of the French colonies, how they were to be treated. And one of the things that we understand from the Code Noir is that every slave had to be baptized as a Catholic. And so one of the things that the Haitians, the Haitian individuals who were worshiping according to the African traditional way, one of the things they did was, in order to avoid being accused of breaking the law, because you had to be worshiping according to the Roman Catholic way of worship. They gave to some of the African ancestors Haitian names. And so, let me rephrase that. They gave to many of the African ancestral spirits the names of saints in Roman Catholicism. So for example, Legba, instead of Legba, they say, oh, we are worshiping Saint Peter. Or instead of Erzuli, oh, we are not worshiping Erzuli, we are really worshiping the Virgin Mary. And so what came about was the fact that in Haitian Vodou, there was this linking of African traditional religion and Roman Catholicism, a combination which, as I said a while ago, a syncretistic religion developed. I want to say also that in the historical development of Vodou, there was an understanding that because French Freemasonry was one of the things that the elites linked themselves with. And, you know, through Freemasonry, they had different types of handshakes, meaning different things. Haitian Voodoo apparently adopted a few of the aspects of Freemasonry. And one Haitian writer, I can't remember which one now, but he referred to Voodoo as the Freemasonry of the masses, the Freemasonry of the masses, emphasizing that Voodoo was a religion, or Voodoo as a religion was doing the same thing for the grassroots level as such systems as Freemasonry did for the elite. Now, since I am emphasizing that Voodoo is a religion, how do people worship? Now, the aim of worship is to ensure that, as I said earlier on, there is a link between the one spiritual being and the individual. And the way this is done in a formal context of worship is they call upon the different spirits of the universe, asking, inviting, pleading with them to come and be a part of the ceremony. Now, one of the things we have to realize is that in Vodou, there's a lot of symbolism. You have symbolism in action or symbolic actions. You have symbolic words. You have symbolic movements in dance. And of course, Haitian emphasis on Africa is the use of drumming and dancing. And so in order to invite some of the spirits into the worship, the symbolic, what we call purifying of the atmosphere is done. For example, if it's the priest doing it, or the priest may have a drink, not water that I just sipped, but it's a potent type of alcoholic beverage, and he sprays it into the air as a means of purifying the atmosphere of any malevolent spirits. And then as the drums continue to beat and as people sing and dance, it is understood that one of the spirits who has been invited to participate will make his or her presence felt in what Dr. Asantewa had referred to, use the word trance, a trance, or what we may refer to as possession, spirit possession. An individual is possessed by the spirit, and in this particular state, in this possession, he or she assumes, he or she becomes the spirit incarnate. He or she is the spirit, the ancestral spirit in the flesh, who is now able to transform you or to transport us to the link with the supreme spiritual being. So basically then, what I am emphasizing is that Vodou, although there has been a lot of negative references to it, it is not black magic. It is not something that is evil, but it is an effort, an attempt by individuals to relate to the Supreme Being. Now, having said that, I must emphasize something about the theology of Voodoo, because in our understanding as Christians, we try to reconcile God, the good God, with any evil that might be allowed. But in Voodoo, the understanding is that God can be either good or evil, ethically good or ethically evil. And so in Vodou, you would find that, remember I said there's a lot was learned out of Roman Catholicism. In Vodou, there are two altars. There is the altar on the left and the altar on the right. I think it's similar to one of the religions that Dr. Asantewa referred to in Brazil, Candomblé, there's Macumba and Umbanda. And in Macumba and Umbanda, there are the two different altars. One in which, if you are asking God to do something good for somebody, you go to the altar that is maybe on the right. And if you want God to do something that is evil for one of your enemies, you go to the altar on the left, the sinister altar. And you know, sinister is that which is, it's sinister. So we do have in Voodoo that situation which has, I would say, caused many persons to think of it as entirely evil. But and one can understand why the term Voodoo instills fear in persons. But I want to say, and I think my time has gone, but I want to say that there is a positive aspect to Voodoo, and that is that the Voodoo priest, or whether it's a male priest referred to as the Hunga, or a female priest referred to as the Mambo, he or she has the ability to understand the medicinal properties of leaves and plants. And that is one of the positives about Voodoo, that the emphasis is on looking at the universe and looking at the vegetation and looking at the leaves and the trees and the herbs and understanding, look, God has given this for us. You know, in Revelation, in the biblical book of Revelation, there's mention of the leaves of the tree are for the healing of the nations. And this is one of the things I see as a positive that can be developed in Voodoo, that some of the more useful healing aspects of ministry can be plowed into it. And so, yeah, I'll stop there because I'm sure there are many questions one would like to raise. But thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Reverend Mulray. And please, everyone, please show their appreciation. It was an absolutely fantastic talk and very, very insightful. Thank you. I think we get to the part now where we're going to open the floor for discussion and questions. I've seen a couple of questions have come through, but before we do, I just wanted to, I guess, make a point and ask a question as well to you all. I think from all of the speakers, it's kind of come across to me that there's an undertone of a lot of British influence in the religions. Whether that's kind of suppressing the African indigenous spirituality and religions, or sort of bringing over new religions in the sake of Hinduism into the Caribbean, and sort of advising or forcing people to be, you know, baptized or changed or etc. And I think something that stood out to me was Dr. Asante was talk about how Comfort was outlawed by the British, you know, the practice was outlawed by the British. And is it fair to say that the fear that the British had for these kinds of African spiritualities has led to then our fear and and you know, the myths that we have for things like Comfort and Voodoo? Or are there other things that come to play? Is there something else as to why everyone's so fearful of these practices? Because I think you've done brilliantly in trying to break down all of the myths. But yeah, I was just wondering, is it more the British fear that's been handed down, or is there other things at play?
Can I speak? You asking generally?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everybody. I thought it was just wonderful. You know, all of the contributions, and I like the way they were complementing each other. I know I whizzed through mine, so I was glad that Reverend George was able to focus on one of them and give that detail, which can be linked to the others as well. And as for your question, yeah, I mean, I think the fear is an inherited fear, because obviously when we came to, or when we were brought to the Caribbean space, there was no one had the fear. We had the natural fear, or the biblical fear. We don't even have like the Bible sense, but I mean the awesomeness of nature, you know, that kind of fear, the awesomeness of God. Yeah, we would have always had that. But now what's happened is this kind of imposition of its negativity onto it, and because it was then outlawed, and I'm not saying Comfort because they wouldn't have quite known necessarily, they wouldn't have understood Comfort so much. It's just generally things that we were doing to manifest the drumming. They would have seen that expression, and certainly in Voodoo, definitely they would have seen that. So they then put up churches all over the place, you know, in Voodoo's case, on literally every corner that they could find, and also throughout the Caribbean, which then gave a sort of a privilege to Christianity, or whatever version of Christianity that was, and told the populace that these others were negative. It was, you know, it was demonized, and, you know, a lot went into that. And so we now internalize that demonization. We internalize this, and what we did, which is part of my contention with this whole process, and why we really need a reconciliation and a reparative justice as part of this whole process, is we then only are able, some of us, to see the negative elements of Comfort or the spiritual system. So where people do naturally go to someone to do something that's negative to another, to prevent them from this and prevent them from that, we only see that as the way, as the thing that's what we use these practices for. You know, in Voodoo, it's just to stick a doll, you know, all the negative things, that's what we see, because we have been colonized psychically to think that that is what it's used for. But what was beautiful in Reverend George's presentation and is just, and also Reverend, I can't see the full name of Reverend Carr, is that it's used for healing, so many different things for healing. If you want to have like children, if you want to get a good job, if you want to go abroad, if, you know, there are so many different aspects of usage that I didn't get to pull out, why we use these systems and why we use the elements as well, the waters, the air, yeah, fire. These are natural phenomena that we use for that communion and connection with the greater divine. And so these are the things that didn't got lost in the translation in preference to the negativity, and to the large part continues to be the case.
Thank you. Reverend George, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
No, I fully endorse what Dr. Santiago said, but I would emphasize that the matter of the healing that I was referring to, not only is it the physical healing, but there's the psychological healing, which some may want to refer to as spiritual healing, because when you go to a Vodou priest and you say to that individual, look, my house is really being disturbed by some evil spirits. And remember, I was referring to the understanding of physical reality and spiritual unseen reality. And one of the things that is very real in our Caribbean region are these unseen spiritual beings that may manifest themselves within either individuals or in places. And one of the things that one will ask, for example, a Voodoo priest to do is, look, I'm having this problem. Can you exorcise for me? And the Voodoo priest, because of his or her training in or understanding of the spiritual realities, is able now to use the symbolic, whether it's the symbolic words or languages. You know, sometimes people say, oh, that's hocus pocus, you know, when they're using words that people do not understand, and use these symbolic gestures to exorcise, to cause the evil spiritual being to come out of the individual or a situation. So I'm saying that there are some positives. You know, the psychotherapy can benefit very much from the African focus as expressed in something like Vodou. And of course, I mentioned the physical, in that now we are realizing more and more that all the so many different bush medicines that we talk about, it's just that we need now to establish maybe scientifically what is the correct dosage and so on. So lots of interesting things can come out if we have a positive regard for that which has emerged from the African cultural context.
Okay, thank you, Ray. I can see someone has their hand up. It's got the handle of the IP Standback Museum. You're able to unmute and ask your question, please.
So I didn't, everybody, hello, I'm Allison McPetrie. I'm an assistant professor at South Carolina State University. And so I wanted to just kind of touch on that question that you had posed earlier, and that I think all these presentations kind of addressed in different ways. That when we think about ourselves as Caribbean people or people of the Caribbean diaspora, we have to remember that these colonizing countries, France, Spain, Britain, the Dutch, when they brought Africans over, in order to justify enslavement, you have to dehumanize Africans. The problem is, of course, that it wasn't one group. There were Africans who came who were Christian. There were Africans who were Muslim. There were Africans who practiced whatever it was that they did in their, in their kind of original practices. So you had to dehumanize that. In South Carolina here, the person who probably led one of the largest slave revolts was in fact probably Catholic. He was Congolese, but he came that way, right? But we don't talk about that. The other thing that's really important, that when we think about African spirituality, is this idea that unlike Western understanding of Christianity, you know, African spirituality, it's the whole being, it's everything, it's all that we are and all the earth, the everything. There's no kind of, this is holy, this is not, right? And so that, of course, is problematic as well. And so what we see, particularly through the British context, is when you ban the drum, right? You can ban the drum, but you cannot ban my voice. We had a program on Thursday, and those of you who may know the Calypsonian David Rudder talks about this idea of the adoption, right? So you make this sound with your voice if you are praying in the Radha tradition or the spiritual Baptist tradition or whatever, and you make all these utterances. And what he points out is that it is not just that you are doing this breath to bring you closer, but that eventually maybe the spirit will also adopt you, right? So that's the kind of complications. In the case of our East Indian brothers and sisters, remember the British didn't want them to stay initially. So there were some small efforts to convert them, but not real efforts, right? The idea was you were supposed to come work your 10 years and go back home until they figured out it was too expensive, right? So this is the complication, I think, and this is the beauty of these various spiritualities, because what Dr. Michelle is talking about there in comfort, you know, is this kind of, and in the case of Shango and Obia in Trinidad, is this attempt to recreate, to hold on to what you remember, recreate, reimagine, and it, you know, make sure that it survived. And then, of course, we have to recognize that throughout the history of the Caribbean, people kept coming. Africans kept, you know, we have this idea that they came once and that was it. No, there were multiple streams of Africans over the course of time, so that more and more new and different ways were being brought over. And in the case of Trinidad and Jamaica, I think it's Jamaica, you had then the slaves, the formerly enslaved, who were brought by the British to the Caribbean after fighting in the War of 1812. So you had a different type of African spirituality that came after 1812. But they came as freed people, freed Blacks, as opposed to the enslaved Africans who were in those territories. So again, their status was different. So that's the beauty of where we are and where we come from.
Wow, thank you. I'm learning so much on this platform tonight. Thank you very much. I'm just going to go to, there's a couple of questions that have come through in the chat box. I think the first one I'll ask to Pandit, if that's okay. Is Hinduism linked to yoga? You're just muted, sorry.
I must pay attention to the box. Right, yes, I did say, I saw it when it popped up. And I would just like to say, yes, you know, if you read that Bhagavad-Gita, you will see the Lord himself, Krishna, who actually spoke the message in Bhagavad-Gita. He is also known as Lord Yogeshwara, the one who is yoga himself. And you know, in the Gita, he talks about 3 different types of yoga. one yoga he calls Gyan Yoga. Gyan means knowledge. Yes. So the knowledge that one needs to achieve whatever you want to, right? That knowledge is a form of yoga. Today, customarily, most people think of yoga as sitting down in various positions and, you know, standing up in one leg and doing contortions. That is known as heart yoga. It's physical practices. But there is another type of yoga that is known as Bhakti yoga. And what is Bhakti? The only way I know how to explain this so that you might understand it, Bhakti is when you do something that you really enjoy doing. You do it with your body, with your mind, and your spirit, all in tune. And whatever you're doing, right, it brings you such great joy that you have no doubt in your mind that what I'm doing is right. Yes, and when whatever you do also, whoever will benefit for whatever it is that you're doing, they also will enjoy. This is known as bhakti. So this form of yoga is service with joy. Yes, service without any regret. So the third form of yoga he mentioned is karma yoga. And what is karma yoga? Each and every one of us have duties to do, to perform. This is called karma. Okay? And this karma, you can have positive or negative karma. Okay? Positive, we call punya, which is good. If you imagine you have a balance sheet, right? All the things that you will do in thought, in word, and in deed can go on either side, either positive or negative. It could be punya or it could be pap. Pap means sins. Okay? So he talks about this karma yoga and the ability of everyone to determine the fruit of this action that you will engage in. For example, somebody asks you a question, no? And you already know that whether you give this answer, whether they'll be happy with the answer, they'll be unhappy with the answer. Then you have to determine, am I going to give that answer or not? It depends who I'm speaking to. But he says, then you must always speak the truth. Because when you speak the truth, you do not have to apologize for anything. Because the truth is the truth is the truth. So yes, yoga is very, very much part of, you know, Sanatan Dharma, as I told you, Hinduism. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for that. And just off the back of that, there's a question that's come up. Are there any physical practices like yoga for African spiritual religions? Do any of the panelists?
So are there any?
I was just asking if anyone knows if there are any physical practices for African spiritual religions, anything equivalent to yoga. Anyone feel free to answer.
Physical practices. Well, you know, yoga is also a ritual, right? It's a ritual way, you know, of life. So yoga is also something that some of these practices incorporate because it's just the way of life, you know, as in doing those exercises and so on. But the rituals that we do are not quite so physical necessarily, but most of the practitioners do. Yeah, they a lot of them would really do stuff like yoga, stuff like meditation, you know, and so that's an aspect. They will do exercises. They will physically eat the right types of food. So things that are incorporated that we recognize to be yoga, you know, from the yoga tradition is also an aspect of, you know, African spirituality. But these are we more sort of think of them as rituals, you know, so like, you know, going to the river, you know, honoring the river deities or the waters, the same water deities, you know, yeah, and generally like bathing and immersing in that vibration of the spirit. So yes, there are similar aspects, but it's not seen in that regard.
Thank you. I think Professor wanted to come in and contribute.
I would suggest that you consider something like stick fighting or candomblé as well. Those are forms of physical exercises that were brought over. They were outlawed, but certainly if you speak to people who are practitioners of them, there's a deep spiritual aspect before one can engage in them. And then I have this whole other thesis about carnival, which is spiritual, but we're not going to go down that road today.
I was coming back on your candomblé. What was it called? You say stick fighting, but there's another. Okay, capoeira. Sorry, is what.
Yeah, capoeira. That's
yeah. So
and stick fighting is Trinidad.
Yeah, and other places. So yeah, capoeira. But
okay.
I noticed in the chat someone mentioned dance. And in Jamaica, for example, whether it's Mayal or Revival, there are particular styles in the choreography of dance relating to African retention traditions. And I would think that while, you know, I'd be reluctant to say it's the same as yoga, but I think any body movement at all is related to ritual, ceremonial, and is a means of communication. And so I would ascribe those body movements as means of communication with adherents of any particular tradition, and also as a means of communicating with spirits. So certainly in Mayal in Jamaica, there are different moves for different times. So if it's a celebration of new birth, that's one kind of dance or body movement, as against a body movement or dance in the case of the death of someone. So whatever it is, I think that once it relates to body movement, it is a means of communication, and I see it in that way.
Thank you. Just moving on, I know Dr. Asante has been sharing quite a few links in the chat, but there's a question here specifically saying, what books would you recommend for a millennial who's interested in African spirituality?
Okay, can I take that as well, please, or add to what others will say? What I did share was the ancestralvoices.co.uk, and I shared the general website, because on that website they have a book where it's a couple that have done an overview of African and Caribbean spirituality, because they went to different places to do this. This was a young couple actually, and they produced. It's called Ancestral Voices, Spirit is Eternal, which if you go to that website that I've shared in there, you'll be able to see that. They've got a DVD, and they've also got a slim volume which does an overview of all these systems, because of course, as we've been realizing, wherever they went, they encountered the same things. So they'd start off in Africa, and then they went to the Caribbean, Brazil, you know, Suriname, wherever. And so they have a lot of links there, and they also do regular uploads on YouTube, because we know obviously our young people kind of likes the visuals. So they'll have lots of discussion. I've been on a couple of them, and so they have these discussions around whatever the subject is. And actually the negativity of African spirituality was one of them that I was on. And they usually have really like practitioners, you know, so you could have a look on the Ancestral Voices YouTube channel, if not a book that you're necessarily looking for. But as I said, they do have a book as well. My book, just does an overview. I don't know if it has to be specific to millennials necessarily, and what that even really necessarily means. I know what it means, but that's why I'm directing you to the YouTube situation as well. I have other things, but I'll just leave it there for others to have.
Thank you. I don't know if the panelists have anything else they would suggest or would like to add. Okay. I don't know how we're doing for time. Afia or Isaac, were there any questions you had as well? Or?
We are doing quite well for time. We've got until 7:25, so I think we can take perhaps maybe one or two more questions. I had a question. I don't know if it's so much a question and a mixture of a comment, because one thing about me is I love to dance, and I find it to be a very joyful experience, and it's great for stress relief and just makes you feel really joyful. So I actually was curious to know, I've seen a little bit of a discussion about that in the chat, but I was curious to know if there are any explicit or further links between dancing and religious practices and spirituality.
Can I come in there on that? You cannot see an Indian temple without the dancers being idolized on the temple. The Lord of Dance is known as Lord Shiva, and in his dance form is known as Nataraj. And in, I think it's Sweden, where they've put this, they're trying to break the atom and trying to find the source of life. I'm sure you guys know about it, you heard about it, but I think it's a mile inside the earth where they build this fantastic machine, and all the scientists are working there to find out the source of life. They're trying to recreate life. And on the top of there, they have a murti, an image of Lord Shiva, yes, as the Lord of Dance. So dance is very, very spiritual. And just to add this bit, yoga means the union with the God or spirit. Okay, so yoga means that union. I mean, in the most simplistic form, you know, if your partner is there and you're dancing, doesn't matter who else is in the hall. Doesn't really matter. That is dance. That's the divinity of dance. That's I don't know how else to explain it, but you can really understand it. That's a union. Okay, and that's a form of yoga also. And while I'm on there, very quickly, one of the questions that you had advised me about was the Caribbean Hindu Cultural Society. So just a few quick words on that. Most of the immigration from Guyana started in the 50s. There are very few people who came before the 50s. But in the 50s, a few Guyanese started coming to London. And among them were a few Hindus. And they are the ones, having left Guyana, coming to the United Kingdom, there was nowhere where they could worship and meet together as a group. And then they had this idea that we should start some kind of society or congregation or whatever it was. And so the Caribbean Hindu Society was born. And because there were other Indians from different Trinidad and Jamaica and all that who were coming at that time, and this was based in South London. And today we have a temple there that was actually bought in 1967. The temple was bought, actually it was an old building, a Boy Scout hall that was burnt out. And they managed to get that building, and now we've adapted this as a temple. So that has been established there all these years, and it's still going very strong and serving our community. So everyone is welcome. Anyone is welcome anytime. at the moment, all our programs are going out in Zoom. So if you're interested with the link, we can actually, I can send you here the link. And if you want to post it, anyone is welcome to join. Yes. So that's the Caribbean. It's now called, because Lambeth Council told them that if you want to get a grant, you can't have Caribbean Hindu Society. You have to have something else. So they put the word cultural. So the British are still influencing us, whether we like it or not. But there you are. But now we're independent. You know, we should forget about them. You know. There is man and there is God, you know, and I've worked out that who am I, where did I come from, why am I here, and where will I end up? If we can answer those four questions and be satisfied with the answers, we're okay. We don't need to worry about all these other things. You know, forget about them. We could not control the past. Our ancestors, they did the best. They did the best that they could in the circumstances that they found themselves, you know, and we should thank them for all the sacrifices that they have done. And when you talk about the millennials, you know, the only advice I have for millennials, look at your parents, but look at them with different eyes. Please don't think that they sold out and they did not make the sacrifice that they should have made for you, yes, because they did more than that. You know, Mahatma Gandhi says, you know, he practiced ahimsa. Ahimsa means non-violence, you know. And when he was questioned about it, he says, to hit somebody when they wrong you, that is the easiest thing to do. But to forgive that person, it is not so easy, you know. And I mean, my thought on it really is that, yes, we cannot forget our history. Yes. Only yesterday, day before yesterday in Parliament, they remembered that 350,000 Black and Indian and the various Commonwealth people fought for, you know, in the world wars. And now they're saying, thank you. Even the graves, they were not even looking after. You know, in time, every Lord always take care of us. I believe that. Okay, so thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I'm going to take the final question from Simone. Simone, did you want to ask directly your question? Feel free, please.
I really don't mind. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all to the panelists for your insightful presentations. I would just like to ask, well, just to seek the view of your thoughts on Rastafarianism, insofar as its close connection and nexus with Christianity, Judaism, and where you think it fits in this whole Caribbean spiritual dynamic. I had to dip in and out of the Zoom, so I'm not sure if I missed any contributions from the Rastafarian perspective, but if anyone can enlighten, that would be great.
I had to slip out. Well, I didn't have to slip out. I also was out for a few minutes because of power failure where I am in Jamaica. But I know the concern about Rastafarianism, and I think one of the things for me that Rastafarianism emphasizes is the value of African culture. You see, there has been a situation where we have tended to be very negative across the world about Black culture, about African culture. And with Rastafarianism, we are seeing an attempt to affirm what God has given to us from the African perspective. Now, interestingly, somebody asked about dance a while ago, and dance is in itself a very important medium of communicating. Well, look, God has given us the ability to move our bodies and And you know, in Rastafarianism, as well as in African expressions of Christianity, dance, movement is affirmed. And so we are not just intellectual beings, we are physical beings as well. And so what I'm saying is that Rastafarianism is helping us to appreciate the African culture, but also appreciate that we are beings, we are physical beings as well as spiritual beings. And just one more thing, one of the things I like about the Rastafarian reference to I and I, where the understanding is that I as an individual can be close to God, close to divinity. It's not that I am claiming to be divine, but it is saying that as individuals, we are made in the image and likeness of God. And that's one of the emphases in Rastafarianism.
I did mention Rastafarianism in my presentation, briefly albeit, with respect to contending with and the movement emerged within the context of the 1930s, for example, when Marcus Garvey was agitating for affirmation of Black identity, the whole business of resistance against imperialism, and the birth and movement towards the independence movement, which was to come later. So I think the emergence of the movement is a reflection of what I would loosely call a kind of resistant spirit that is at the same time resilient. It's not going to roll over and play dead. It's not going to call defeat. It's going to press along. It's going to move forward. So that's one. Secondly, the birth of reggae music in Jamaica, which many see as a kind of, not just any old kind of music, but you know, overladen with, you know, spirituality in its own way, I think is credit to that movement. Again, for its resilience, it had a lot of struggles, especially in the 1960s, and a lot of pushback from the authorities. And the fact that it stuck to the course, I think is credit to the movement. And then its recognition as an official religion, I think is by UNESCO or United Nations. I think again is credit to it. So it is pretty much now a well-established religion and is recognized throughout the world. Lots of writings. Someone like Barry Chevans, late Professor Barry Chevans, has written extensively on the movements. It's well established and therefore has to be seen as part of the religious landscape of the Caribbean. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think Afia's just said she wants to ask a question.
Good evening, everyone. This is the last question for this evening. I've been asked to ask, what is the Anglican Church doing to prevent the American Pentecostal takeover in the Caribbean?
Thank you. I suppose that one is directed at me. Yeah, good question. At this stage, I don't know that we can talk about prevention. The Pentecostal movement is here to stay. It's a question of how we're going to coexist with the movement. I suppose the major concern of the question is the movement of American imperialism that is generally associated with the movement, because even now, when we talk about things like advocacy against gay rights or abortion, etc., that movement tends to be at the forefront of leading those kinds of advocacy, and they are funded heavily by their North American counterparts. And that's not just true in Jamaica, it's true across the English-speaking, French-speaking, Spanish-speaking Caribbean, all the way down to Latin America. So in a way, it's a globalized movement, and it is well established. In fact, even recognized now by the World Council of Churches, which is a global ecumenical organization. So I'm not sure about pushing back at it. But I think what has to happen, if I interpret the question correctly, is the continued march against imperialism and domination by different ideological groupings, economic blocs, etc. And in a funny kind of way, what Dr. Santiwa is presenting and what Dr. Mulrain spoke about, I think we have to give more credence and credibility and recognition and celebrate the work of these, what we loosely call indigenous religions and African retention religions. I think we have to give more prominence to those, because imperialist groupings tend to strive against some of these indigenous groupings. In terms of the Anglican Church in particular, pushing back against Pentecostalism, I think it's fair to say that one of the ways I would think we have to do that is to continue to open the eyes of all our people to the march of globalization generally, but how that is very often clothed in the imperialist ideology, to say, as I mentioned in my presentation, it is what comes from outside that is credible and not what is local. And I think, for example, the fact that within the Anglican tradition, we are adopting some of the indigenous expressions is in itself a resistance to that kind of ideology. So, for example, in Cuba, the Anglican Church in Cuba has embraced Orisha and the Orisha practices as part of the religious expression of Anglicanism in Cuba. That in itself is part of recognizing the indigenous tradition, incorporating it into the tradition, as we have done with revival music and rhythm, for example, in Jamaica. We have a communion setting now that is written and reflective of the revival music and melody in Jamaica. So in one sense, it's the recognition of the indigenous tradition, it's elevating it, celebrating it, and also recognizing that, the imperialist march is still on. And so that fight against imperialism is not over. So I know, for example, one of our colleagues, Dr. Burchell Taylor, in one of his books, Saying No to Babylon, writes expressively about resistance against imperialism. And he mentions Rastafarianism as an icon of that kind of resistance. So not just the Anglicans, but the traditional churches are resisting. Cartwright Davis, an Anglican priest, colleague, writes, he has an old book called Emancipation Still Coming. That is setting the stage for the ongoing advocacy that is required of not just Anglicans, but since I'm speaking in that light now, there is a project of emancipation that is ongoing, and we do see ourselves as part of that ongoing project of emancipation. So we're fighting back from many directions, and the fight continues. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your talks today. I think we'll close the question and answer session here, and I'll just hand over to Afia now.
Thank you so much, Stacey. I am now going to announce the end of the event. I want to thank all of the panelists for agreeing to speak. Thank you so much. All of your talks have been incredibly enlightening, so thank you so much for your time. I want to thank the Caribbean Links team for all of their help, participation, support, and incredible hard work. I don't do this on my own. As you can see, I work with a brilliant team. So thank you so much to them. And finally, I would like to thank all of the guests, all of you for tuning in. Thank you for kindly choosing to spend some of your Saturday afternoon with us. We greatly appreciate you attending, and we hope to see you next month for our next event. Please, can you follow? I'm actually now going to pass over very quickly. Sorry, I apologize to the brilliant Isaac.
Hello. So if you would like to follow us on social media, you can do on Instagram and Twitter. Our Instagram is Caribbean_links_group. and our Twitter is @LinksCaribbean. Back over to Afia.
Thank you very much, Isaac. I would just like to let you all know that our next virtual panel event will be in May, and it will be about the Asian Caribbean experience. And we hope very much to see you there for what again will promise to be an enlightening conversation. Thank you all so much for your time this evening. See you next time. Bye, everyone. Thank you for coming. See you.
Bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.